of things. So it's lovely to see you all today. Thank you for coming. I was thinking of an old memory, and I wonder how many of you will know this one too. I think it was a program I watched as a kid called Romper Room. And the host used to say, "And through my magic window, I see Barry, Jim, Cathy." And I feel like Zoom is our magic window. And I am so grateful that I can see all of you, and there's so many of us gathered here today. So I'm Roz Cook, and I will be leading the program today. And again, thank you all for joining us here. I'm particularly delighted that Reverend Cathy Corbin-Mannino will be our speaker once again. She never fails to keep me engaged and to leave me with something almost tangible that I can nibble on inside my head for the rest of the week. She always feeds me in that way, and I'm quite looking forward to what she has to share today. So with that said, here are our opening words. As kids, our stock answer to most every question was nothing. What did you do at school today? Nothing. What's new? Nothing. Then, somewhere on the way to adulthood, we took a 180-degree turn. We cashed in our nothing for busy. I'm starting to think that, like youth, the word nothing is wasted on the young. Maybe we should try introducing it into our grown-up vernacular. Nothing. I say it a few times, and I can feel myself becoming more quiet, decaffeinated. Nothing. Now I'm picturing emptiness, a white blanket, a couple of ducks gliding on a still pond. Nothing. 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 How did we get so far from it? And that was by Amy Rosenthal. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce Jim Reay, who has offered to light our chalice today.
Thank you, Roz. In conjunction with our theme of consolation, desolation, I've chosen to read the beginning words of Amanda Gorman's poem that she recited or read at the inauguration last week. First Lady Jill Biden suggested that Amanda Gorman read her poem. She is the youngest poet laureate to contribute to an inauguration. The poem she wrote is "The Hill We Climb." When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we know it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished.
Beautiful words. Thank you, Jim. I could hear those so many more times and not get tired of them. Thank you. Right. Next, we will do a unison reading of our covenant. As most of you know, our church does not teach or preach dogma. We simply have principles that guide us. And the promises we make are only to ourselves and each other when we come together on Sundays. The covenant is on the screen, and I encourage you all to read it aloud with me, even though, sadly, mine is the only voice you will hear. Love is the doctrine of our congregation. The quest for truth is our holy right, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in friendship. Thus do we covenant. Thank you. And as you all know, our joys and concerns will happen, but they will be at the end of our service. So that moves us right on to our offertory. And again, each week we do similar things. We take up an offering. Our commitment to our church is something we carry in our hearts and live through our actions. One of those actions is financial support. Many of us make pledges, and others simply donate what they can, when they can. It is all gratefully received. The PayPal information, if you'd like to donate that way, is already in the chat window, and here it comes again. And if necessary, we'll happily list the street address of the church if anyone needs that to mail in a check. And I haven't offered in a while, but my husband Tom would come by and pick up your cash donation if necessary, because he's a nice guy like that. And we have some beautiful music for the moment.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a land where people can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the glad tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them gardens instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once vain and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come build a land, my people we seek. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
Oh, well, there was a lovely old favorite. Thank you. And now I am very pleased to welcome back to our stage Reverend Cathy Corbin-Mannino. Today's topic will sort of be a sister piece to the one she gave 2 weeks ago. We're sort of matching up the ideas of consolation and desolation and noticing, I'm sure, the similarities and probably the differences. So welcome, Cathy.
Thank you, Roz. Thank you for those nice, kind words. And thank you, Paul. That was a beautiful, perfect hymn for today. And Barry and Jim and Joe. It's so good to be with you. I'm glad to hear that you don't mind some repeats of Amanda's poem, because you'll hear that today. Victor Hugo said that it is in books that wise people derive consolation in the troubles of life, while MLK Jr. wrote that music is the best consolation for despair. I have found both statements to be true in my life, books and music, excellent sources of consolation, and I wanted to highlight the consolation that I have found in words and music today. I chose the title for this talk, There Is Still the Light, prior to our recent presidential inauguration ceremony. Little did I know that I would be blown out of the water by one of the most powerful poems I have ever heard or read. A beautiful, talented, 22-year-old African-American woman named Amanda Gorman read her poem, The Hill We Climb. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, heard it, and I would not even try to recite it because I couldn't give it justice. But I do want to read again a portion, the first line. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? And she goes on to answer the question in the last lines. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. Starting in the evening prior to the inauguration, with the memorial for the over 400,000 deaths from the pandemic, and moving through the inauguration ceremony the next day, on into the evening with the Celebration of America concert, I was lifted from one sacred form of consolation to another. Eddie Glaude, chair of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton, shared that the COVID-19 memorial pulled the grief and regret out of the privacy of our hearts, if just for a moment, so that we could all share it. All of that was so desperately needed. But prior to all that, I already had experienced some consolation following the desolation we experienced as we witnessed the insurrection at the Capitol. I felt consoled in the fact that democracy in the United States, for the moment, held. Congress and the courts did their job in recognizing the legitimacy of the election. We saw Mike Pence refuse to be bullied into rejecting the electors. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Liz Cheney, the third-ranking Republican in the House, condemned the violent storming of the Capitol and held Donald Trump accountable for lighting the flame of insurrection. And then we watched the House impeach him for a second time, this time for sedition. For now, democracy has survived. What further consoled me was to see how many, many people all around the world really cared. As far as we know, we humans, and perhaps some earthly animals, are the only beings in this unimaginably huge, expanding universe that have the capacity to care about each other. We can reach towards others in our own pain and emptiness, our desolation, while also reaching toward others to offer comfort, consolation. Reverend Karen Johnston says it's inexplicable, this ability to care while living in between the two polarities of desolation and consolation. Here's her poem of the same name. Inexplicable, how we rise each morning instead of burying our heads under bed covers, sewing them shut. Why we keep on welcoming babies with bone-deep joy to this sordid world. How we fill burlap sacks with grit and gratitude, our hands shredded as we drag one over the other. How we refuse the daily pull towards greedy dark, keeping at least one toe, some of us our whole torso, in the light. Inexplicable. It's what makes a poem worth writing, worth reading, worth flooding the world with redundant, flawed attempts at explanation. It's just the way it is. There is no other way. Stumbling every time, practice or no, just part of the bargain. The unavoidable, intractable, inexplicable bargain. And James Baldwin reminds us in his poem that this caring for one another, consoling one another in our desolation, is imperative to our very survival, because nothing is fixed. For nothing is fixed forever. Forever, forever, it is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails. Lovers cling to each other and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. It's not only democracy that's fragile. And sometimes we may have to wait for the light, as Wendell Berry wrote in the reading 483 in our gray hymnal, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. And the light will come again, as we are reminded by Reverend Robert Weston's poem, I will lift up my voice in song. I will lift up my voice in song, for in singing I myself am renewed. And the darkness of night is touched by the promise of a new dawn, for light shall come again. Buddhist wisdom says that life is suffering. I'm not sure that the truth of suffering is the only truth. It is also true that there is the relief of suffering, consolation. The wisdom of physics tell us that all life is energy. There is only energy. That even when we experience cold, cold isn't real. Cold is only the absence of heat energy. Temperature is the energy of clashing atoms. The more energy these atoms have, the hotter the temperature. At absolute zero, the atoms have no energy and would stop moving completely. A cubic meter of deep space would make you freeze instantly due to the lack of atoms. The good news is that this temperature is said to be physically impossible to achieve. Maybe life is all joy, punctuated by suffering and desolation, and then joy is restored with consolation. The polarities of desolation and consolation in terms of our emotional and spiritual well-being were explored in depth as early as the 1500s by St. Ignatius of Loyola. For Ignatius, consolation and desolation describe the relationship one had with God. Closeness to God resulted in feelings of consolation, while distance from God led to feelings of desolation. Consolation and desolation comprise a spiritual compass in terms of our choices made and the direction we are traveling in life. For those who do not find God language useful, consolation can be understood as all that is life-affirming, while desolation refers to that which is life-denying. Consolation, among other things, is empowering, while desolation is a state of powerlessness. This recession and political instability, the pandemic, all of this have driven this sense of desolation we've experienced. It all has invoked strong negative emotions: fear, hopelessness, despair, misery, grief. The list goes on and on. Trapped in this pessimism, it is difficult either to imagine or seek consolation. UU Minister Reverend Barbara Paskin, in her sermon, What to Do When Nothing Can Be Done, She says we can simply be with each other, sweetly and tenderly, for we need each other. She made a list, a to-do list, for times when there is nothing to do. Slow down, pause, breathe, call a friend, cry, walk, exercise, drink less caffeine and less alcohol, drink more water, watch TV less, daydream more, do something for someone else, get quiet, meditate or pray to whatever good or God receives your prayer. Don't settle for distractions. They don't eliminate the problem. It is a fact that quiet meditation, reflection on the good, emptying your mind, watching your breath, over time, this will change your mind, and this will work changes in you. It doesn't solve anything or rework the world, but it will change you. And you are enough. Life is what it is, and it is enough. Birds don't live very long, but each day they sing. The flower lasts only a few days, but each day they lean toward the light, the sun. Nadine McSpadden writes, during our darkest moments, still there is light. When facing our biggest challenges, still there is light. When all we can do is put one foot in front of the other, still there is light. When we can't see the way out, still there is light. When all we can do to help is hold someone's hand as they cry, still there is light. For we are the light, for ourselves and for one another. So always there is the light. I know many, if not all of you, heard President Biden's inaugural address. I would like to repeat some of those words of courage and commitment because they consoled me, and I think they bear repeating. We all need to press forward with speed and urgency, for there is much to do, much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. For the dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. We are confronting political extremism, white supremacy, and domestic terrorism, and they will be defeated. But this will require much more than words. It will require the most elusive of all things in democracy, unity. We unite to fight the common foes we face: anger, resentment, hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome this deadly virus. We can reward work, rebuild the middle class, and make health care secure for all. We can deliver racial justice for all. Our history has been a constant struggle against the American ideal that we are all created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, and demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial. Victory is never assured. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward. Let us start afresh, all of us. Let us listen to one another, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics need not be a raging fire destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject a culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. Violence did not silence the will of the people. It did not stop the work of democracy. It did not drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine wrote that people are defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects that we love that define us? Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and responsibility to defend the truth and to defeat the lies. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility. There is no accounting for what faith will deal you. There are some days when we need a hand. There are other days when we're called on to lend a hand. We need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We are entering what may well be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside the politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. We will get through this together. The world is watching today. America has been tested and we have come out stronger for it. We will lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We will be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. We have been through so much. Now we must step up, all of us. It is a time for boldness, for there is so much to do. Together we can write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, an American story of decency and dignity, of love and of healing, of greatness and of goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch, but thrived. This is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generations to follow. So with purpose and resolve, we turn to the tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another, and to this country we love with all our hearts. His words soothed my emotional pain. Lady Gaga's song, as she faced the flag singing "It Still Stands," reassured me. Hearing Jennifer Lopez sing that this land belongs to all of us uplifted me. The beauty of DC's reflection pool and the 400 memorials to the COVID-19 victims comforted me. The sound of resounding trumpets gave me strength. Using sign language to give the Pledge of Allegiance felt like we were not leaving anyone out. I even found a measure of peace watching the perfect symmetry of the soldiers' movements. Consolation is ours to find everywhere when we seek it out, ours to experience if we're open to it. And I'd like to close with a song that has never failed to give me consolation, especially when I sing it, because singing lifts my spirit, settles my mind, consoles my soul. When peace like a river attendeth my way, or sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, life has taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well well, stay well, live well. Namaste.
That was good.
Thank you so much, Reverend Cathy. Your beautiful voice deserved sort of a few moments of peace to let them sink in. But as always, that was the message we needed to hear today. Thank you. So now I ask you all, if you would, to please join me in a reading of our West Valley mission statement. It will appear on the screen. We agree to provide a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for living better lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches. You will need to use your imagination just a little bit as we extinguish the chalice. And Reverend Cathy is going to offer a benediction and the closing words.
Benediction for today. May we move through this day consoled by the truth that the light is ahead of us, and together we will find it, because our whole soul is in this.
Thank you. And I would just like to say a few other thank yous before we have our final music. To all of you who have joined us here today, thank you. To our inspired speaker, Reverend Cathy Corbin-Mannino, thank you. To our musicians, Kelly, Joe, Paul, and Barry, thank you. And finally, to our host, Paul. Paul spends countless hours each week preparing this service as he intertwines the music and the pictures, and his time and drive to do this well makes our services so much more professional than any of us in our small church could have managed. So we are very thankful for that.